Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Bienvenue and welcome. It is Game Over Montreal for the fourth straight win for your Montreal Canadiens, and I am in a temporary studio tonight as my in-laws are visiting, which means my office is now a extra bedroom in our home for the next week here as the kids are home for spring break. I am excited to be here with you tonight, though, because the curse is finally broken, my friends. This is, I believe, the third straight game that I have seen the Montreal Canadiens win. So it's hype time. We got to talk about the state of the rebuild. We got to talk about a lot of stuff. Kirby Dach is out for the season with another knee injury. God, I can't imagine what's going on through his head. Uh, Great win tonight from the Montreal Canadiens against the Buffalo Sabres. We will talk about that. And of course, at the end, we'll get to your questions and answers in our overtime segment. And I just noticed that the overlays are incorrect. I forgot to reset them because I'm on the solo scene and I'm not used to it. So I will fix that as we are talking here. But overall, it's going to be a fun one here. But before we get too deep into everything, we got to tell you about Hyperdrive Hockey. Hyperdrive Hockey broadcasts twice a week from the Game Over Network YouTube channel, which you can find by clicking right here below this video, or if you're listening on the podcast, search Game Over Network or Hyperdrive Hockey wherever you get your podcasts, and you will find it. Head to the YouTube channel for Game Over Network, and Hyperdrive Hockey is right there. You can click play all on the playlist that we've already made for you and have some fun with it. All right, we've got Max Van Hoot, Daphne Malbouf, and Kevin Laramie, who are breaking down hockey news across the league, across the world, with a Canadian focus and a Quebec focus. Broadcasting in English, three Quebecois friends are bringing an amazing show that is unlike anything really that you've seen in hockey. It's very different and it's very fun. So I highly recommend you check it out. I haven't heard a single bad word from anybody who has. So go check it out. Bernardo Sunier is in the chat here with King of the North. Kay is here. Hey, Kay. Trizak and Matthew Barret. It says, Dobesh, the goalie of the night. 4 straight wins. That's impossible, says Bernardo. Here to remind you all that Hamilton bad. The city or the play or the person. Trizak says, Andrew hosting in the middle of a rave. Yeah, this is my wife's dance room. So I could turn the camera and you could see the pole because my wife teaches pole dance. But we're going to focus on this background. I'm not going to move the camera around a bunch. So yes, also Seth Jones was traded to the Florida Panthers. I am sure he will fit in perfectly there as a big mega guy. All right, it's going to be a fun one tonight. We have lots to talk about. And I want to start talking off. I want to start off talking about Uri Slafkovsky because it's going to be like the one downer note for tonight. I noticed in the first period specifically, the Canadiens played really, really great hockey, but the first line had 3 shifts where they were really hemmed in their own zone. And overall, they didn't really give up much. That was kind of the story of the game tonight for the Canadiens, is that even when they were not playing that great, when they were letting the Sabres kind of take them to the woodshed at certain points, they weren't really giving up the high quality scoring chances. Even when they did, it was players like Jaden Struble who would make the final big save, or there were some big saves from Dobesh as well. But for the most part, they were playing pretty solid prevent defense in this one. But that first line, I thought, not playing too well in their own end, kind of losing a lot of battles. And I kind of paid attention to the rest of the game, figure out where the problem was, because I was kind of looking at Cole Caulfield at the beginning, but I think it was Slav. I think Slav had a pretty mid game tonight, and we talked a lot about how when Slav has a great game, that top line goes from like a good line to a great line. And yeah, tonight I thought they were good. Slav had some okay moments, but it wasn't a great game. And I know that with the comments that he's made recently, that he's probably going to beat himself up a little bit over that and want to be better in the next one. So good luck on that, Slav. But yeah, he was not great tonight. He was just okay. Whereas Cole Caulfield scored that wonderful goal to open the scoring, which was such an interesting sequence because Lane Hutson got handcuffed at the opposing blue line. 2 Sabres players take off on a 2-on-1. Cole Caulfield's the only one who has a chance to get back, you think. And he stays engaged in the play, pushes hard to make it difficult to get that 2-on-1, and it allows Lane Hutson to get back on his horse and get back involved with the play as well. They break up the 2-on-1. The puck comes out. Hutson exits the zone. All of a sudden, Suzuki finds line A, and who's there now zipped around the entire arena and back on the rush offensively is one Cole Caulfield. Takes that puck and wires it home for the opening goal. And if there was ever a play that could sum up for Cole Caulfield specifically the value of playing good defense, man, I know that this isn't like a watershed moment for Cole, and I don't think anybody expects him to be Nick Suzuki defensively, not even close. But I think we all have seen over the last little stretch here, going back to last year, going back to when he wasn't able to score at the rate that we all expected him to, he has improved his defense. He went from a liability defensively in the first couple of years of his NHL career to now being like okay, maybe on the bad side of okay, but often one of the hardest workers defensively on the back check. Like I notice Cole all the time, especially on the power play. He's always ready to chase down when things go bad. And I am very pleased as somebody who wants this team to do well to see all the progress that Cole Caulfield has made on the defensive side of the puck. So I'm going to give him his flowers tonight. MFM points out it's Cole's 29th. It's a career high tonight. He's going to score 30 right away. I still think he's going to get 40 this year. I know that the runway is running out. Game 60 now. He's got 22 games left to get 11 goals. But frankly, that's not a huge ask for Cole Caulfield. 11 goals in 22 games is not absurd. Every other game, I think he can do it. I don't think he has to, but I think he can do it. I think the way this top line is playing, and Nick Suzuki now over 60 points on the season, again over a point per game after he had that little drop off right before the break, or right before the Four Nations face off, I should say. Everybody's looking good on from that perspective. Andrew Pole Dance if the Habs make the playoffs. You know what? I don't want to make any promises, but we did have an idea. It wouldn't be for like this specific season, but we're thinking about different things that we can do with you all, our community, to try to, not necessarily grow our company, but to put our money where our mouth is. And one of the things that I was thinking about doing is I have a friend, Astrid from Inchu Bijou, which we will talk about in a minute, who's big into the queer scene here in Montreal and the drag scene, all that stuff. So I was thinking in the summer for Pride Month of doing like a fundraising stream for something like the Rainbow Railroad or like some sort of organization. I need to dig into it and figure out what we want to do, because when we tried to do something like this last time, it kind of got pushed and pushed and pushed, and then we weren't able to execute with SDPN the way that we wanted to. It was 2 years ago in the playoffs, I think. But I would like to do something to raise money for people who are dealing with a lot of awful shit right now. And I think that would be really fun to do like a live stream where somebody's like putting me in drag. I would have to shave the beard, obviously, but we can get to that when we have to. All right. Bernardo says Dobie staring down Greenway was awesome. Absolutely. I love that from Dobesh. I don't know what he said to Greenway to get him to turn around. I hope it wasn't anything that we're going to see in the morning and be like, oh, that's awkward. I hope it was just shit talk in the game. But yeah, I thought that the Canadiens showed a lot of fight tonight. I thought the Buffalo Sabres were kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. I was going to get to that in the third segment, kind of compare and contrast the two rebuilds. So I won't dig in on that right now. What I will say is I wanted to talk about, before I talk about Hutson, because he, for me, is the main story tonight, I did want to talk about Owen Beck, because we're going to talk about Kirby Dach as well in the second segment here, but Beck is stepping in for Kirby Dach. And we know that line with Newhook, Line A, and Dach has not been great this year. They've had moments where they've been okay. They had that stretch over the holidays where they actually looked like they were turning the corner. But we know Line A at even strength right now is a work in progress at best. He is looking a lot better by the eye test since the Four Nations face-off, but I don't know how much of that is just small sample sizes and the fact that he's scoring now, which makes everything look better, right? He's getting the points, which is great. 6 points in 4 games now since the break, kind of putting up points like Suzuki and Caulfield, right? And always good to have. But Owen Beck has kind of turned that line into a decent line. And I don't know what that necessarily says about Doc. It could be a fit issue. It could be a confidence issue, as we saw earlier in the year. There are moments this year where I thought Doc was turning a corner. This knee injury now, I don't know. It's going to be tough. But the takeaway that I had from this game was that Beck looked good. Like, Beck has looked really good every game. Looks like an NHLer already. And we expected him as a fan base, I think, to be auditioning for Jake Evans' job for next year. So dropped into Kirby Doc's job instead is a much higher pressure situation in a moment where the Canadiens are not actually playing meaningless games. This isn't an end of season like we've seen over the last few years. They want to try to make the playoffs here. I don't think they're going to. I think they could. I don't think it's likely. I think that they are pushing things in the right direction. And the fact that Beck is stepping in and looking so fit for the situation already in this situation is just really good news for the Montreal Canadiens. And I was actually looking through, because I haven't had the time this year to talk too much about the Laval Rocket or watch the Laval Rocket that much. But I kind of took a look through during the second intermission, and that team is really interesting. Like, there's nobody who's necessarily lighting the world on fire offensively. Like, you could say Barboulay, team leader in points. Dauphin and Joshua Waugh are leading in goals with 17. But again, 17 and 43, that's not amazing. It's good. It's not amazing. But they've got, 10 players with 20 or more points. And they've got a bunch of players in like that 35, like 25 to 35 point range that are all contributing. There's a lot of good players on that Laval team now that are probably going to be NHL players. Joshua Waugh, Owen Beck, we're seeing right now. Jared Davidson has 31 points in 49 games this year. Like, is he going to be a top 6 guy? No, but Jared Davidson could very easily be a 4th line guy in the NHL, I think. And then you've got, Mayu, 27 points. Sean Farrell has a beauty assist tonight. I think he actually will have more because he scored tonight and the site hasn't been updated yet. Florian Jacki, fantastic rookie year in the American Hockey League. Adam Engstrom, same thing. And then you've got guys like Raphael Harvey-Pinard, Xavier Simoneau, and Luke Tuck, Philip Meshar, who are like a little bit either further down the road in their own career path and are no longer like high-end prospects, or there are guys that are more long-term focus guys, right? That might be able to fill in spots down the road. And I think this is the big thing about this situation for Montreal is they have a lot more depth than they have had in a very, very long time. And they have the leeway for some of these players to not work out. Some of these players are going to be traded for other players that fit their needs better at the time. They've put themselves in a very good situation through great drafting and excellent development, where you have guys like Emil Heineman, right? Who looks fantastic. Even though he hasn't scored since he's returned, he looks great. Got a great shot tonight. 2 good chances in the first period. I'm impressed with this team overall. But Lane Hutson, that's the big takeaway. Kay says she'll be hosting the stream on Monday. Yes, and Conor Tomalty, who guys haven't really seen on Game Over Montreal, will be on that stream as well. He's going to jump in for Game Over Montreal for the rest of the season, help us out here. Mark says Andrew is rocking the sexy 70s theme for this one. I like it. Yeah, I am. This is the dance room. Every once in a while, our kids put on their spectacs at the end of the night, dancing around to Lady Gaga. And my wife teaches dance out of this room as well. Bernardo Sunny says, Dobby, I know that I already read. Krzak says, seems Laine needs 2 guys on his line who play with pace. Doc likes to slow the game down, and Laine gets even slower. That is a really good observation, and I agree. I think Laine needs to be the only guy who isn't constantly moving, and he kind of needs to get lost in the flow of the game. His line mates kind of have to make the game move around Laine instead of Laine chasing. Whenever you see Laine chasing, like watch him on the defensive side, it's not great. It's not his best situation. Bernardo Sunny says at least one game, Line will do this thing where he'll super slowly get into the zone and deke someone out, and it's really funny. Yes, it is very funny. I also love that. It reminds me a little bit of the Savardian spinorama from Savard, but obviously a little bit more offensively inclined from Line. Let's see, Habs 4-0 since Heineman came back. That's right, the Heineman effect. Lost 0% of their games since Heineman returned. Heineman is like the hype guy. This is the facts. Is it a coincidence? Yes, but also no. I remember when Alexei Emelin was a rookie back in the Bergevin years. This same thing happened where, for whatever reason, when he was in the lineup, the Habs were basically undefeated, and whenever he was out, they always lost. And then everyone assumed that it was all about Emelin specifically, and then the next year that relationship completely disappeared and almost like turned the opposite. Things happen in small sample sizes, so don't read too much into it. All right, Lane Hutson, I did want to talk about him before we switch over to the next segment. I wanted to keep this one short, but already I'm probably going a little bit too long just because I enjoy chatting with you all in the stream chat here. All right, I saw a lot of folks saying that this might have been Lane Hutson's best game. And I don't necessarily disagree. He was all over the place. I know that his control of chances was incredible. Control of shots, expected goals, all that. He was by far the most dynamic player on either team, in my opinion, tonight. The second goal for the Canadiens from Josh Anderson. I thought Dvorak should have shot initially and that they overpassed it. And then when it got to Anderson, I thought he missed the net. But no, he didn't. It was great. But that was Lane Hutson driving the net through the middle of the ice, acting like a centerman instead of a defenseman. It's the kind of move, actually, we've seen in college from Hutson, but he hasn't done that much aggressive, out of position play in the NHL so far. And that's one of the things that I was talking about a lot earlier in the season when there were folks who were concerned that like he would never score at the NHL level. And he's not scored a ton this year. I think he has 4 goals, but he's also not playing as aggressive as he was in college hockey. So I would caution everyone who thinks that Hudson's not going to score a lot of goals in the NHL to be patient and remember that he has been thrust into being a number 2 defenseman at the least at a tender young age when we were expecting him to play like third pair to start this year. He's been absolutely incredible at it, had to play a lot more defense than he's probably expected to. And I think he's played a more cautious game, and he's still putting up ridiculous numbers. So when he gets to the point where he is confident enough to take more risks when the team around him is better to be insulated from those risks, I would expect Lane Hutson's goal totals to go up a lot because he's not going to be shooting from the blue line anymore. He's going to be digging in and doing stuff like that where he's driving the net or sneaking in for those like backdoor one-timers like Markov used to. Those are the kinds of plays that you're going to see Lane Hutson score on in the NHL, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. All right, let's switch over to the next segment in a minute here. But first, we got to talk about an ad from Inshu Bijou, which I will play shortly because Inshu is amazing, and their owner and I guess what would you call it? Founder, everything. Astrid runs everything. She's absolutely incredible, and she's the designer of a lot of their pieces. Obviously, they have other people working there too on the Wicked team, but check out Inchu Bijou, 4000 Rue St. Ambroise, and the date for the next Maleficarum market is wrong in this ad because I need to record a new one. They've got one coming in April. I believe it's April 20th, the weekend of April 20th. So, as you know, there's something about that number that you can have fun with, but here's an ad for Inchu. We are so excited to tell you about our new partner here at Game Over Montreal, a delightfully witchy goth and glam jewelry store making handcrafted art that varies from subtle silver to gold pieces to glamorous bespoke. Inchu Bijou is more than just a company. They've built a community through advocacy and a welcoming attitude that has made them an institution here in Montreal. Located in the historic Chateau St. Ambroise, Inchu Bijou also runs seasonal themed markets called Maleficarum Market, or Marché Maleficarum en français, where artisans from all over get together and showcase and sell their wares. Drop by 4000 Rue St. Ambroise, Suite 278, and say hi to Astrid and the Wicked team, or head to inchubijou.com and enhance your style. The next Maleficarum market will be on the weekend of February 8th and 9th. We'll see you there. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. Welcome back to Game Over Montreal. We're going to talk about Kirby Dach. So before I get too deep into it, I'm going to ask you all a favor because I'm obviously here hosting alone. I've got no guest to bounce ideas off of. So I need you all in the chat who are live with me here tonight. First of all, smash like on that. Smash like on the button. Come on, right there. It's right there for you on YouTube. It really helps us when you hit like on the video. It really helps us if you subscribe if you're liking what you're watching also. That's like really, really nice for us. But I need to ask you all, how are you feeling about Kirby Dach? What are your emotional and more nuanced reactions to what's happened here? Another knee surgery for Dach. I don't know if it's the same knee. I haven't had time to look into it. I must have missed when he got injured somehow. I don't know. I'm busy with the kids a lot and the back end stuff in the business. But what are you all feeling with Kirby Dach? Because I think the biggest takeaway for me right now is I just feel a profound sadness for him. I'm not really thinking about it from a hockey perspective because all I can think is how tentative he looked earlier in the season trying to test out that knee and how not like himself he was playing. Because those who watched Kirby Dach his first season and games in Montreal, he's a very reckless abandon style player. You know, like he goes into corners, he's a board battle machine. Like that's what kind of separated him in Montreal. Like when we were watching him was his ability to win battles, his ability to be physical and kind of dominate, along with being a very good playmaker and like a decent shot, but I wouldn't call him necessarily a shooter, right? He was a play driver who drove play through winning battles and putting the puck in good areas. I don't think he was necessarily the greatest like zone entry guy or whatever. He was kind of like a keep it simple guy that had enough playmaking talent to do like pretty interesting and impressive things. But wasn't that guy this year. He had periods of time where he looked like that guy for a short stretch, but he hasn't been able to maintain it, and the level of confidence has not been there for the most part. And now this happens where, you know, you're trying to get into the mindset where you can play that way and believe that your knee is going to be okay, and then it's not, and you have to have surgery again, and you have to go back and do that whole excruciating rehab process. And obviously, I don't understand it at the same level, but I've been there over the last year and a bit rehabbing injuries that just seem to like not go away or reoccur at the drop of a hat when in a situation where you don't necessarily think that it would. And it is mentally so tough to go through. And I really hope that Kirby has the support around him to get through it because there is still a player there. But as this continues to hit, it brings me back to watching Andrei Markov. He got hurt the second time when I think he came back from the knee injury, and then he got hurt by Carey Price's skate. I think cut the tendons on the top of his foot in like a goalmouth scrum. And then he came back from that and blew out his knee again, I believe. It was like this series of ridiculous injuries, long-term injuries that Markov dealt with. Then he came back finally and looked terrible. And everyone wrote him off. Markov ended up having a pretty damn good end of his career. Now, Kirby Dach is not Andrei Markov. He doesn't have the same level of cerebral quality to his game that Markov had. But that doesn't mean that he can't change his game and continue to be an effective player. But I wonder if that's up the middle at this point. Face-offs are overrated for me overall. I don't really focus on them much as like a determination of whether or not somebody's going to be a good center. You know, Evgeny Malkin was in the 35% range for face-offs for most of his career. I don't think anybody's removing him from the center position. But with the struggles that Doc has had this year and the face-off thing being relevant when you're not a dominant player in other facets of the game, I think when he comes back, the Canadiens are going to have to start him off at the wing just to keep things a little bit simpler, right? And that means the second line center spot is not just a question mark this season. We talked coming into the season about how we were going to be checking up on Kirby Dach all season long. We're at game 60 and that's gone. There's no more checking up on Kirby Dach and looking at his progress this year. We have to move on the conversation and talk about something else. I'm going to go through here and read some of the comments about Kirby Dach. Bernardo Sunday says, feels so bad. Marc Dumont says, it is the same knee. God, man. It is the same knee. That's awful. That's just really awful. And Mark says, at this point, Dach needs to get himself right. He must be going through a lot. This is beyond tough. Yeah, it is. Adam says, not ready to give up on Dach, but he's going to need to go to training camp next year, guns blazing, playing the best hockey of his career. Rizak says, Dach 3C. Kay says, I feel very bad for him. Mark, hockey doesn't feel as important. Totally agree. I mean, obviously, it's probably pretty damn important to him. He probably just wants to play and feel good. But this throws a wrench, right? It's not nobody's fault. Sometimes things like this happen, right? I remember back in the day, I don't remember what year it was now, maybe Mark does, but when we were working at EOTP, the Canadiens had a draft that looked incredible. They took like 6 players who were projected to go in the first or second round. Guys like Tim Bozon, Charles Hudon, and they had a couple other guys there too. Sebastian Kohlberg was one. They ended up trading Kohlberg for Vanek, so got something out of that pick. And almost all of those players, something went wrong that prevented them from having the career that people expected. Tim Bozon caught meningitis, and was never really the same. It happens, and unfortunately, that's the way it's gone with Kirby Dach. See here, MFM says, yeah, I think his mental health is more important right now. The guys are tight, so that must help a lot. Yeah, I hope so. And Mark mentioned that Dach had 1 primary assist at 5-on-5. I know that can be misleading, but I think it's very telling. Yeah, I think it is telling in this case because Dach is a playmaker, right? You would think that he would find a way to set guys up a bit more. I know that Laine is not a great even strength player, but he's still Patrick Laine, so Dach at his best I would assume, find ways to get the puck to Laine in good spots, but we didn't see Dach at his best this year, and I don't think Newhook was a fit with either of them either. So yeah, it's weird. It's, at the end of the day, it's not a huge sample size on Dach, and there are mitigating factors, but 1 primary assist at 5-on-5 is just not enough. Mark says when you're below David Savard for primary assists, it's not great. It's not great. Je suis Claude says, I'm happy because I'm Quebecois. I mean, that sounds cool to me. I don't know the last time, I don't know what that is referring to, Claude, but yeah, being a Quebecois is awesome. And being in Quebec, I mean, honestly, that is one of the things that is keeping me going right now is I don't think there's anywhere in Canada that I'd be feeling more safe amid the aggression of the United States than Quebec. It's not going to go over here. There's no way Quebecois folks are going to accept a bunch more Anglophones because of their country. Another 300 million Anglophones. Don't think so. They're going to fight back. So, yeah. Mark says, correction, Laine is not a great even strength player unless Owen Beck is. So I guess the main question I have for you guys, and it'll be like the finishing segment question for this segment, and then we'll move on quickly, is does anybody think that the Habs can stand pat and assume that what they have, that they're going to be okay for 2C between Dach, Beck, and let's say Michael Hayes? I think Hayes has a shot at being good enough to do that, but I've got a bit of a different runway for the Canadiens in my head of what they need to do than betting on what they have. So you folks, let me know as I switch over to talking about another one of our sponsors, the same motel, and you tell me whether or not you think the Canadiens need to, make a move here and address the 2C position. I don't think it's necessary for this year, but eventually, got to think that there might be something, right? And what does that look like? Who do you want them to chase? Maybe we'll talk about that again in the Q&A section at the end here. But first, here's a word about Le Saint Motel, a selfie studio located right next to Bijou at 4000 Rue Saint Ambroise in Montreal. Looking to make awesome memories with your friends? Take some promotional pictures or videos for your business? Check out Le Saint Motel in Montreal's Sud-Ouest borough. It's an amazing selfie studio located in Montreal's historic Chateau Saint Ambroise, right next to Bijou. It boasts 12 plus unique decors for you to enjoy and make memories with. Hop into their iconic heart-shaped ball pit or transport yourself back in time to Expo 67. Le Saint Motel can also come to you with mobile decor setups available to rent for events, including setup and takedown, or you can head to lesaintmotel.com right now for more details, or to check out their amazing decors that are always being updated. Now, let's get back to the show, but before you do, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Montreal, Game Over Network, and smash like on this video because it really helps us out. Welcome back to Game Over Montreal. I am your host, Andrew Berkshire, here on behalf of our group that includes Marc Dumont, Imam, and Conor Tomalty. We are dedicated to bringing you the best Montreal Canadiens coverage and the best and most fun post-game show that is interactive with you, the fans, the people who actually make this stuff worth doing. Because let's face it, hockey's fun and all, but part of what we like about it is the communal experience. There's a reason why people go to games still, despite the fact that it costs like $250 a ticket, and you could sit at home on your couch and watch on like a 60-inch TV and have a great experience, because being there, being part of it, being part of the fan base matters as much as the actual hockey does. That's why doing this stuff together is so much fun, because we actually do like hanging out and having part of the human experience. All right, let's get into it a little bit on the state of the rebuild. I'm going to read through your questions here on Doc here, or not your questions, sorry, your answers on Doc quickly, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the path forward. All right, Vaguely Sober says, Saint Motel, the band, no, the selfie studio here in Montreal at Chateau Saint Ambroise. It's a great place. Take some fun pictures with your friends, hang out. It sounds weird. I remember when Astrid told me about it, I was like, a selfie studio, okay? I don't know how that's going to work. And it's just been like a big moneymaker for them because people like it. They have fun. They've got like a bunch of different setups there that you can take different fun pictures with, and just a cool time. Kay says, nope, you don't have to wait for Hayes right now, or you don't have time to wait for Hayes right now. IMO, you got to spend the money and assets. Ooh, Kay, do you want them to get a center right away, or are you thinking in the summer? Mark says, seriously though, Andrew, you're one big red paint splash on the face from being God of War. Yeah, I know. That's, half accidental because my clippers broke, and half because both my kids really want me to Kratos like all the time and act like the youngest will literally walk around and be like, Father, Father, and act like Atreus because I'm a bad dad and let my kids watch God of War, an uber violent video game. But it's a great story, so worth it, I think. Ramelli, oh, welcome, Ramelli. Says Hayes won't be here soon enough. Need a real 2C for next year for sure. Hayes in the NCAA next year. I agree, he's not coming over. Adam 7777 47s. I'd say asking it after 15-ish games of Beck. Okay, that makes sense. Jean-Francois Paré says, no need to make a move for a new C yet. Let's wait until Demidov gets here and we'll see what the Habs still need. Trizak says, Laine, Beck, Demidov, adequate. I mean, and Beck would be pretty freaking happy. You got to imagine, right? Mark says, more than fair, but let's just say that Laine's 5-on-5 stats are usually uglier than the club when the lights come on. Yeah, it's very true. 5-on-5 has always been a struggle for Laine. Fact of life, it's the player that he is. You can live with it when he's scoring and you have the support structure around him to absorb a player like that, right? Just like Kyle Connor in Winnipeg. He's brutal defensively. I know he's been better this year, but for most of his career, he's not. And Scheifele's the same. That's why when Laine was there and Scheifele was there and Connor was there, it was too much. Like, that's why Laine was traded. It wasn't that he was just disappointing. He was, of the three, the one that they liked the least. And you can't have three players who are one-dimensional scorers on this. You're never going to win anything. It's too many. Kay says Summer. Oh, okay. I mean, if you found someone for the right reason, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course you do. The price has got to be right. I am still on the Habs sign Sidney Crosby is a UF train. I know this is unrealistic. I know. But I just can't get it out of my head that he's going to end up in Colorado on this current contract to win a cup with McKinnon. And once he's a UFA, he's going to sign a sweetheart deal in Montreal and finish his career here. And you might be thinking, oh, well, Crosby would be pretty old at the end of that. He'd be like 39, 40. I don't care. I think Crosby will play, if he wants to, until he's like 42 to 45. Like his decline just like it's just steady, man. Like he's like a hockey surgeon. Steady hands. The decline doesn't move. He's going to continue to be excellent. I think that if he doesn't have to be the be all end all, if you've got like Suzuki, Caulfield, Slav on the first line, and then Crosby gets to like 20-year-old Demidov, I think he'll be all right. I think he'll be very happy about that and be very glad to mentor guys like Beck and Hage as they break into the league. And the opportunity of having somebody like Crosby, I think we've talked about this a bit on the show, that one of the things that has kept the Penguins good for so long is just Crosby's work habits. You know, he's an incredibly talented player, yes, but to be as good as Sidney Crosby is for as long as he has been, you need to be absolutely incredible at doing the little things over and over and over. This is something that I try to like get home to my kids all the time, because when you're young, I find there's a tendency to, I've done this once, I know how to do it. I'm not going to move. I'm moving on to something else. I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. It's boring. Yeah, we found this a lot with our kids learning cartwheels. They would try once, and then once they'd kind of nail it, they'd be like, okay, never need to learn that again. But in reality, whenever you want to be good at something, you have to practice the most boring, most basic thing all the time. Like I do that with boxing. Twice a week, I'm in the gym just working on the same three punches. You know, it's the same three things over and over and over again. And you're just improving minute little details until everything takes a step altogether because you focus on those basic things. And those habits bleed through teams. I've talked a lot in my career covering sports about the idea that shit rolls downhill in any organization. If you have a bad leader at the top, it's going to fall through all of them. If you have a good leader at the top, it's going to follow through and it will lift everyone up. I think we saw that in Montreal with Marc Bergevin, where you had an emotionally immature decision maker who panicked constantly, didn't follow through on any plan, and that bled through on the ice, where we saw teams that should have been much better than they actually were have stretches where it seemed like they had no system whatsoever, where it was Carey Price or nothing, and that's where we were. All right, what's the conversation going on here? Owen Beck is line is support, emotional support. Fantastic. Crosby, Tavares, and this kind of good vet would be perfect. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want Tavares, but I think Crosby would really take the Canadiens to the next level. He says Monahan. I mean, Monahan was great here. What a fantastic move from Kent Hughes and company. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit in this last segment quickly, is the difference between this management group and the last one and the vibes of it, right? I think what is Mark doing that he's making Kay upset? Oh, and Marchand? Marchand just got injured, so thankfully that's not going to be a question that we need to talk about. No Marchand to Montreal. Come on. Him giving Konechny a piggyback at the Four Nations was funny, but when he's not wearing a maple leaf on him, we still hate him. Let's be real, Mark. No more. But yeah, I think the biggest reason the vibes are so different this time is not necessarily even about the depth, right? Because when Marc Bergevin took over, you know, Carey Price in his prime, Pacioretty hitting his prime, Subban hitting his prime, Galchenyuk, top 3 pick right in there, Brendan Gallagher breaking into the NHL. He was already really strong. Lars Eller was there, you know, Markov was there. And like Carey Price is just such an X factor. You can build a team with that. They had great pieces. And that first year where Bergevin was in charge, the vibes were off the charts. Even with Michel Therrien as coach, they coached an offensive system that first year, and they crushed teams. People forget that team was incredible. And then the playoffs hit. Every single player on the team caught bonitis and was injured to death. And Marc Bergevin decided that that meant they needed to get bigger and went out and signed a bunch of bad players and made the team worse. The panic isn't there with this management. The plans are. I think that's the biggest thing. You can see so much more pragmatism with this group that they can make a trade like, say, Kirby Dach, right? At the time, home run. You're losing Romanov, who is a redundant player in the organization anyway, was never nearly as good as the last management group made him seem. And yeah, you flip him for a first round pick that's higher. Maybe you could have used that first round pick, but you use that first round pick for a young, high end draft capital guy who could fill a spot right away. You sign him to a really strong contract that should be good value throughout. And despite all those things being positive, it didn't work out. Like, we can't say that it for sure will not after Kirby Dach comes back from this injury. But 3 years in, this is not what people wanted, right? A guy who just hasn't been able to stay healthy, who hasn't been able to recover some of the magic that they had earlier in their career. It hasn't worked out. But because Hughes and Gorton have made so many good moves, they can absorb that hit. It was nobody's fault, really, that on balance was a good move and keep going. And it's not that big of a hit. Whereas Marc Bergevin was so scattershot that when things went bad, it was like an utter disaster. There was no long-term plan. And that's why right now, I mean, looking at the whole of the world and how everything's trending, I don't blame anybody for being a pessimist about anything right now. I think it's really hard to have an optimistic viewpoint, but at the very least, after years of watching this team struggle, I have a very optimistic view of the Montreal Canadiens. So that's the one thing I think in many of our lives that's trending in the right direction. So let's get together on that. All right. Romelli saying trade for Malkin. Yeah, take one of the two from Pittsburgh, hey? All right, let's switch over to the question and answer segment, our overtime segment, because I can't talk forever. And I want to hear from you all. So fill up the chat with your questions. It can be about anything, and I will go through them as soon as I can find the overlays and switch them out. And then I can go back here and transition into our question and answer segment, and we can hang out. So let's see what we got in here. Romelli says Seth Jones traded to Florida. Yeah, we can talk about that. Apparently Seth Jones has been having a pretty good year in Chicago. I haven't really had much chance to track any other teams this year except for Montreal, so you can all fill me in probably better than I can fill you in on Seth Jones. But I don't think that is a great move for Florida. I know that it's a little bit different than what Seth Jones would be asked to do on most teams because Florida has some great defensemen. Jones isn't going to have to play on the top pairing. So maybe the old Peter principle will kick in and he won't be as overmatched as we saw often in Columbus and his first year or two in Chicago. I don't know how long he's been there now. Maybe just one. But yeah, and losing Spencer Knight, I mean, Spencer Knight hasn't turned into the goalie yet that I think many of us assumed that he would. But yeah, it's an interesting bet from Chicago, at least, to kind of bet on a first-round pick and a goalie of the future. I don't know if Chicago had another goalie in the organization, but it's probably not a bad idea to add some depth there. Bruno Saunier has he talking about Seth Jones. King of the North says, Andrew, you beautiful human being. I hope you're doing well at the club tonight. Yeah, it's a very quiet club. It's just me talking. And I've got my wife and her parents downstairs watching something, probably a movie or something. And the kids are asleep. So a very quiet club here tonight. We've just got the lights going. Trizek says, if you had a warning label, what would it say? Should I be too honest on that and say can have temper tantrums over random stuff when you're overstimulated. Yeah, I've got the old ADHD thing where when things bother me, I like don't talk about them, and then things like pile up and they build up over time, and it's like you kind of you're like here where your baseline should like be falling down, but your frustration level is just like right here, and like little things blow your top. But I'm working on it. We all try to work on it. Mark says it's a dumb move by Florida, but they'll end up winning the cup again. So what do we really know? Yeah. So this will be what, 6 straight years with a Florida team in the final. I mean, I'm not gonna go and say that it's like a conspiracy or anything because I think that's dumb. But there are some infrastructural things in the NHL that 100% allow those teams to have advantages, just like Vegas. The NHL is not interested in changing that. I think they want the Sun Belt teams to have a bit of a boost, and I understand it from a marketing standpoint. But as things continue to go for Canada and the NHL's overall lack of movement in growing the game in Canada, I think they've really shown a dereliction of duty over the last 30 plus years, where there are fewer people playing and interested in hockey here than I think there's ever been as like a percentage of the population. And part of that's just changing demographics, right? There's people who are into different stuff, and I think that's good that we're having a more diverse array of interests, but there's been not much effort from the NHL to grow the game here. I think they just assume that it will be strong no matter what, and that they can just be lazy and not do anything. I don't think it's true. I think it's facing a tough situation the next little while here. You look at the average age of people watching broadcasts, and it's bad. You know, from between 2000 to 2017 or 2016, sorry, the average age of people watching NHL broadcasts in Canada went up by 16 years. Like by 1 year, a full year every year, which means no new fans, right? A lot of the fans are not necessarily watching the broadcast. They're watching either on illegal streams or straight up through social media and commenting on it that way. It's a different experience. And frankly, our media hasn't been able to meet that audience where they are. And the NHL has made almost no effort to, especially in Canada. Uh, People making fun of my bald head. Spare room, is the spare room the garage? You talking about my place? No, basement. King Norris is allergic to hair on the top of the head. Yep, I am. You know what? There's some stubble. I gotta shave it still. Chicago retained. Jones is at 7 mil is a lot more palatable, but Chicago's gonna get heartburn eating that much for that long. Yeah, no kidding, eh? That contract just started. The Chicago rebuild is not looking great. I know they have great pieces, obviously. Connor Bedard, Nazar, like there's some great pieces there, but I don't know. Again, kind of scattershot. It reminds me a lot of Detroit, where they can't decide what they want to do, and they're trying to do too much. Romelli says, "Funny how Kachuk gets hurt and suddenly Florida trade for a big contract. Then miracles happen, and Kachuk will be okay for the playoffs." Yeah, I think both Kachucks could do with shutting the hell up. I think that's something they could both learn from. I know that Matthew Kachuk likes to embrace his, Brad Marchandisms and be a dirty guy and agitate and all that. But Brady Kachuk, I don't know if you all saw any of the clips from him appearing on the Shitty Barstool podcast, but man, just quit while you're ahead. I don't know why they're doing this media tour after losing. It's very like it's incredible loser behavior, as Mark and I said when we were on the podcast together. But let's see. Bernardo says, Andrew, what's your take on the Habs potentially trying to trade for Elias Pettersson? You think it's too risky? You know what? If you would have asked me, like, even at the beginning of the season or a couple months into the season, I would have been all for it. But man, watching Elias Pettersson right now and like this season, I've watched him a bit. I'm worried. I'm worried. Something's not right there. I don't know if he's playing hurt or what, but he doesn't look right. And that's not the guy that they signed. Now, if it's a situation of him being unhappy in Vancouver and that's what's causing anything, then yeah, trade for him any day of the week. He's a phenomenal hockey player, or at least was for a good stretch. But whatever's going on right now, if I was Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, I'd want to be talking to Pettersson and I want to be talking to his agent and figure out what the actual situation is, as it feels messy. And I don't think the Canadiens can afford to spend the assets and tie up that much cap in one player who's that much risk. And I think that's why JT Miller traded more than the Canucks feeling like they had to go with Pettersson. I think there was like age and past ability would dictate you would want to go with Pettersson, even though Miller has been better in the playoffs. But I think it was more about market viability. Trading a contract that big is tough. And trading a contract that big when the player looks like a shade of them for their former selves is extremely, extremely tough. Bruno says in their language, it's beta behavior. Yeah, it is. Chicago has too much of their talent tied up in smaller guys. They need Porter Martone so bad to make this build work. I don't know about any of that. I'm a big fan of the smaller guys. If there was anything that could sum up how I feel about small NHL players, and yes, I am biased as a small, short man myself, but Zach Benson tonight, and frankly, every game against the Canadiens, goes right at Arbor Jackeye and is not afraid of him. And I just love that. I feel like the pint-sized guys are always like that. You know? It reminds me of Brian Giunta going after Zdeno Chara, or David Desharnais going after Zdeno Chara. So there's always a lot of fight in this. So I'm hesitant to say that a team. I find it's a cop out, and our media does it a lot, and rarely ever defends like the logic behind it, or like with facts backs up what they were trying to say. They just say too small and then move on. Kay says Benson pisses me off so bad. I mean, he should. That's what kind of player he is. All right, folks, thanks for joining me here tonight on Game Over Montreal. We'll be back with you on Monday. Kay is hosting. I might pop in for that one as well, but I am not sure because my in-laws are here and I want to spend some time with them. We'll see you then.